next. So, well, how did you do in 2008? Did you have a good year? Two of us. Well, you're still here. Let me just remind you, you are here. And so that has to say something about 2008. Did you keep all your resolutions? Yeah, right. Me too. Although we did good on a couple things in our life. One of the resolutions, Kathy and I resolved at the beginning of this year that we would complete our education this year. And we did that. That's over with, and we're very glad that's done. I resolved personally that I was going to do devotions no less than 5 days a week and send an email out 5 days a week. And I don't think I missed a day in 2008. Even Christmas Day, I sent one out. I was real faithful with that. And I think that's the first year I've ever done it faithfully. If you're not on my devotion list, I ask you just to give me your email address any way you want to, and I'll get you on that list. That is a continued one for 2009. I plan to continue that. In 5 years, I will go through the whole Bible in the devotion list, and then I'll start over again as long as the Lord lets me live. Of course, I'm 62. Pray that God will let me get through the Bible at least once. That's my goal. Another thing that last year professionally, I said that I have got to revitalize the classes. Most of you remember the membership, maturity, ministry, and mission classes that we had years ago, and we've let those die, and because of that, I think we've lost the motion of disciple making. So this year we've refocused it and we've renamed them. I Belong is the membership class. I Grow is the maturity class. I Fit is the ministry class. And then I Go is the missions class. And we've done those in September, October, November, and December, one of each. So I did accomplish that goal. I got them back online, got them going again. And we're going to continue that in January. And as Mitch said, January 11th, we'll have the next Belong class, I Belong. And that's a membership class. And now, just by coming to that class, you're not committing to anything. You're there to find out more about our church. And it's kind of a round table. We'll sit around in circle, and maybe tables, maybe not, depending on how many comes, and we'll just talk about the church. And anything is fair game. You just ask anything that you want to, and I'll do my best. And of course, I'm trying to motivate some of the elders to be there with me on that class, and we'll do our best to answer any question that you might have about the church. So whether you've been or not, you might want to consider coming back on January 11th, and besides, there's free pizza. Enough said. Okay. So we've got that up, and so that was kind of good. I completed that thing. However, I will not talk about the ones I did not keep, and I'm sure you have plenty of those as well. But as I was finishing 2008, I found myself just overwhelmed with stress, all different kinds of stress. I was dealing with things to do that I hadn't done. I had all kinds of just burdens on my life. And I began to read Psalm 23. And the beauty of Psalm 23 struck me so profoundly in the way it was an antidote to my stress that I thought, I need to talk about this. And here we are. And since I'm the one that gets to choose what we talk about, I'm sorry. We're going to talk about it. And I hope you find it as encouraging as I do. Because I'm assuming that most of you know what stress is. Most of you have dealt with stress. And there's all kinds of stress in life. And I want to talk to you about how God has given us the antidote. There's an animal, according to medieval biology, if you can call it that. There's a lot of questions about the validity of the story, but I'm just going to tell you about it anyway. It's the ichneumon. An ichneumon, there is an ichneumon wasp that you may have heard of, but this one, an ichneumon, is a little fuzzy little animal, kind of like a little bigger than a rat, not quite as big as a mongoose. However, it is like a mongoose in that this ichneumon, its arch enemy is the snake. And it will fight a snake, a poisonous snake, always to the death. And it will do that freely. And it's the way that it is always victorious is that when it gets bit, it runs immediately to the plant that is an antidote to the venom of the snake. And as soon as it's bit, it breaks off the battle, runs and eats the plant, and comes back in the battle. Now, I read this story about 4 different sources, and then I've read several sources that say it's not true. But for us, it's true, okay? We're just going to take it for face value. And the point is that this animal, this ichneumon, knew where the antidote was. And when it found itself in the middle of the stress, in the middle of the fight, in the middle of the battle, and in the fray of war, it would break off and go and eat the antidote. And then it'd come back and re-engage, and it would always win the battle according to the story. I tell you, that just really moved me when I was thinking about Psalm 23. It is the antidote to the stresses, the pains, the struggles, and the problems of your life. And you can't go to it often enough. And the interesting thing is, all of you know it. Most of you could recite the 23rd Psalm, couldn't you? Well, I want to spend the next 6 weeks talking about it in detail. There are 6 verses. We're going to spend 6 weeks looking at it, and we're going to talk about it as it serves as an antidote to the various kinds of stress that you and I experience in life. All of us have been bitten. All of us have been bitten probably by all the different kinds of stress that we'll talk about. And so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So what I want to do today is just kind of preview where we're going to go for the next 6 weeks, okay? I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to tell you where I'm going. And then next week, next Sunday, we'll begin with the first verse. And the first sermon on the series of Stress Busters, the first is going to be the stress number 1 of worry. The stress of worry. And Psalm 23:1 says, a Psalm of David. And by the way, that's a real important little phrase. And by the way, a Psalm of David is part of the inspired text. It's actually in the Psalm. It is not something added by a writer years later. It is in there. It has always been in there. And it's important to understand that, because to understand David's life, you don't understand stress unless you understand what David's going through when he wrote this. We'll talk about that a little bit more detail next week. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I have everything I need. It just feels good saying it, doesn't it? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Say it with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That's enough for right now? I don't know about you, but I'm a worrier. Are you a worrier? I can worry about just about everything. I worry if I'm not worrying, don't you? Really, I'm afraid I'm not taking it seriously enough, and I'm worried even if I don't worry. But in this message, and next week we'll look in detail about how God as a shepherd. Isn't it interesting that Jesus uses the analogy of being the shepherd? He's our great shepherd. Well, what does the shepherd do for the sheep? He provides, he protects, he guides, and he corrects. And that's the outline of next week's sermon. Talk about that in detail. And I will do this for you, the great shepherd says to us. Jesus says this, I will do this for you if you let me. Break off of the fray, leave the battle, and come to me. All ye who are weary and heavy laden. And you know what I'll give you? Rest. Just stop. Well, the first one is dealing with worry. Number 2, the second one on the 11th we'll deal with is weariness. And all of you workaholics, almost alcoholic, all you workaholics know just exactly what I mean. And anybody here willing to admit they're a workaholic? Yeah, I know. My wife better raise her hand. No. I am a workaholic. Well, let me give you some clues. Do you find yourself in a hurry frequently? You're a workaholic. Is your to-do list in the morning always longer than you can accomplish at the end of the day? Yeah, you're a workaholic. Do you ever take a day off of work to get caught up with work? I took 3 days off to write the outline of this sermon thing there. And as I was reading that, I thought, my goodness, I'm obviously a workaholic. I stayed out of the office for 3 whole days so that I could do this. I took time off. I'm a workaholic. Have you ever had more than one person tell you to slow down? You're a workaholic. Do you feel guilt whenever you relax and are doing something that doesn't produce something? You're a workaholic. And my sermon on the 11th is going to be all about RELAX, relax. And we'll talk about how God says, stop the fray, step away from the battle, come to me. Come to me. I am the great shepherd. I will take care of it for you. We'll look at that on the 11th. Then the third one on the 18th is going to be indecision. Do you know the most stressful thing in my life is trying to make that major decision, that big decision in life. And when you have major decisions, am I going to sell my house? Am I going to buy another house? Kathy and I have been struggling with this question. You know, we hate the house with all the stairs. We keep thinking of moving out. I hate pushing snow. I hate, mowing the lawn. I would like to get to a condo or someplace else. Are we going to sell the house or are we not going to sell the house? Are you going to take this job or that job? I mean, some of you single, should I marry this person or that person, and et cetera, et cetera. These major decisions, when you struggle with these things, don't you find them stressful? We've had some of those serious decisions in our house to deal with, and I find them very stressful. Listen to what Psalm 23 says. He leads me in paths of righteousness. Now, notice, he leads me. Our great shepherd says, do you want to know? Do you want to find out what to do? Do you want some good leadership? Stop the battle, step out of the fray, come to me. I'll help you find out what you should do. Now, I've had many people say, well, I don't know I've tried that. How do you know what God is telling you to do? Come and I'll tell you how you can know how God is telling you what to do. I won't disappoint you. I always have an opinion on those things. He leads. All life is a series of choices, by the way, and we make our decisions, and then our decisions make us. And it's very important. And just to give you an idea, the subject of how to find God's will for your life begins with admitting that you need guidance. To have a shepherd, you have to admit that you're a sheep. And that begins that way. And when you come down and admit that and acknowledge that, there's hope. That's encouraging. Indecision. That's a very difficult one, and we'll be talking about that. Number 4 is the stress of difficult circumstances. And I'm really looking forward to this message because you know this. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Even though I walk through the valley. I did a study on the word valley in the Bible, and I was surprised at how many different kinds of valleys there are. Here in Psalm 23, we got the valley of death. In Joshua 7:26, we have the valley of calamity, disaster that strikes. And how do you deal with, how do you get through the valley of disaster or calamity? In Psalm 84, we got the valley of weeping, grief, mourning, pain, and suffering. And it's called the valley of weeping. In Hosea 2:15, you have the valley of trouble. It seems like I walk through the valley of trouble every day. The valley of trouble. And these valleys, how do you deal with those? How do you deal with the valley of death, difficult situations and difficult circumstances in your life? And how do you be as a psalmist and say, as I walk through this valley or that valley or this valley, I'll fear no evil? You really need to come to that message. I've got some really great points to share with you. It's really a powerful, powerful message in my opinion. Let me tell you a couple things about valleys. They're inevitable. They're unpredictable. Right? They're impartial. They'll come. But let me tell you a couple other things about valleys. They're temporary. Valleys are always bordered by a mountain before them and a mountain after them. That's what makes a valley. And persevering in the times of the valley, running to the antidote, is what will help you hold on until the mountain comes. So, number 4 is how to go through difficult circumstances. And our shepherd, the great shepherd, says to you and I, stop the fray, step out of the battle, and come here. Come to me. I've got the antidote. I've got the antidote for your difficult circumstances. Number 5, on February 1st, the 5th one is going to be the stress of conflict. Have you ever been hurt by anybody? Yeah, I think we all have, haven't we? Everyone has experienced that at one time or another in your life. And we deal with that hurt in different ways. We face it in different ways. In verse 5 says, to God. You may have noticed that there's an interesting shift. Although the first three is he, the last three are you. It's a shift from third person to first person in the psalm. I thought that was fascinating. You prepare a table before me. Who is he talking to? The God, the judge of the universe. The one who deals with all rights and all wrongs, all hurts and all problems. You prepare a table before me. And where do you do that? In the presence of my enemy. You anoint my head with oil. What does that mean? We'll talk about that. And my cup overflows. All of us have been hurt by others. How do you handle it? Are you a Rambo? Are you a Clint Eastwood? Make my day. Are you a Don Knotts? I mean, how do you handle with conflict? I hate conflict. Don't you hate conflict? I hate it. And sometimes the worst thing you can do is suppress it, bury it, swallow it. You have to deal with it appropriately. And this psalmist is talking about dealing with it with God. And the psalmist, our great shepherd, says, stop it, step out of the battle, come here, come to me. I want to help you deal with your conflict in life. I've got something special for you. Doesn't that feel good? I like it. And finally, the last point is stress number, the fear of the future. Of course, none of us are afraid of the future. I would like to bring my 401k from a year ago and show it to you today of what it was worth a year ago and what it's worth today, even after continually submitting every month into it. Of course, you've seen that in yours, haven't you? Are you afraid of the future? Are you afraid of the future now in this temporal situation? Are you afraid of the future now and afraid of the eternal future? Look at what the psalmist says. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. His life, his time on this life, his future on this life is held in the hands of the great shepherd. His temporal future is here. And you know what I believe about my temporal future? Goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And you know what I believe about my eternal future? And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Stop the fight. Step out of the battle. Get away from the snake, okay? You know the symbolism. Get away from the snake. Come to the good shepherd for the antidote. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leadeth me, he maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Let's pray. Father, I just pray for each man, woman, and child here today that they would hear from the great shepherd. And first of all, Lord, that they would have faith and confidence in the great shepherd, the one who sent his son to die for them, who came into the world to take care of our sin, to resolve the worry in our life by paying the penalty for our sin as we've celebrated with communion, who helps us deal with our weariness in life and our busyness, helps us to relax. Our Lord, the great shepherd who leads us in the right paths, those who helps us through all the difficult circumstances of our life. Lord, that the one who helps us deal with conflict and gives us mastery over our future, and that we can say with David, I shall